Hello, friends. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to Chickenlandia and welcome to Bawk Tawk, your 100% friendly backyard chickens Q&A 101 question and answer show. That is a mouthful. If you are here on the live stream on YouTube, thank you so much for being here. If you are listening on my new podcast of the same name, Bawk Talk, I'm so glad that you are listening. We just launched the podcast last week. The response has been great. There are actually people listening to it. Which you never know when you start something new, you never know, is it going to take off or is it just going to fall flat? But so far I have had listeners, and that is absolutely thrilling. The podcast has been in the brain and in the works for over a year, and finally, with everything going on, I have suddenly found myself with a lot of time to get things done. So we pulled it off, and I'm so glad we did. So I just want to say hello to some of the people that are here live in the chat. I have 13 Moons Homestead. She is one of my amazing moderators. And if you haven't checked out her channel, go check her out. She's got some really exciting things going on. And if you're just getting into homesteading, I think it's a great channel to follow because she's really like just a gentle soul, and it's very not judgmental, and she's kind of like learning as well as she's going, and it's also a channel that's easy to watch. So there's my pitch for 13 Moons. Go check out her channel. Brilliant Creatures, thank you so much for being here. Camp Canine Daycare, thank you so much for being here. I have a question that I'm going to talk about for you later on. Chloe Smith is here. Thank you for being here. So I hope you guys have been having a good week so far. We're only on Monday. So hope you had a good holiday yesterday. If you celebrate Easter, Easter is just one of my favorite holidays. It really just, especially right now, because there's so much uncertainty about the future. And, I don't know about you guys, but I posted about this on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter yesterday, but I have the tendency to just kind of like sit there and let the wheels turn, like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then it might go into, oh, all these really bad things are going to happen and nothing's ever going to be the same. And so I really have to keep that in check. And of course, one of the ways I keep that in check is by going out and being with my chickens and remembering that I'm in this moment. I'm not in this future scary moment that, doesn't exist. And then the other thing that I love about Easter is that it's about like life going on and rebirth. And that just brings me right back to chickens because, as somebody that has some super duper old chickens, I've had lots of losses and I rescue. So that means I even have more losses on top of that. And I just always remember that in the spring, there will be baby chicks again. And so right now, more than ever, that's been helping me just to think about how, it's going to be okay. Life is going to go on. So there's my Easter thing for you. Uh, let's see. Well, obviously, Oscar, you're going to have to go to another channel to find that out because I'm not like a YouTube guru channel. I'm here to talk about chickens. So, speaking of chickens, I wanted to give you guys an update on my little rooster, Philippe. He just finished a 2-week course of antibiotics. And if you know anything about me, you know that I do not do antibiotics lightly. I very rarely use them. But I'm also not one of these people that's just like vehemently against using standard medicine if it's needed. So he had come down with a respiratory thing, and then I went out to check on him, and I realized that he had like this totally blocked nair. Now, this is my rooster Philippe. He is, by many people's standards, a terrible rooster. If I bend down to change the chickens in the duck's water, he attacks me, he bites me. It's it's awful, and it never ends. Every time I go into the chicken yard, he's there, like he's just like ready to throw down. He's gonna sweep some legs. But he's a little guy. And I've had him since he was a baby, and I put up with him, and it turns out that I actually really love him because I've really been trying to, bring him back from this issue that he's having. But the problem is that, I took him to the vet, and he has this really, really blocked nair, likely from a chronic respiratory thing that he has had. And it is just not coming out without putting him, under sedation, which I really don't wanna do. So now I'm kind of, after 2 weeks of antibiotics, he's doing much better. And I'm also treating him homeopathically because I do use homeopathics, and I had a consultation with my homeopath, and she told me what the best remedy for him would be. And so I have been doing that and seeing a lot of improvement from that. Um, so I'm gonna look here in just a second. I know there's a conversation going, so I'm gonna look in just a second. I'm reading. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm reading the comments, and sometimes people are just having these very detailed conversations, and, and then I have to catch up. So so yeah, I just don't know if I want to put him under sedation because which would mean that he would get, some gas so that the vet can really get in there and try and get this mass out that we're assuming is either infection or just, we really don't know. So uh chickens can very easily die from anesthesia. And that is what I'm very, why I'm really reluctant to do it. And also, he's back out with his flock. He's like happy for right now. I don't know how long he would have if I didn't go forward with trying to have this mass removed. But I just don't know if I want to put him through that. So it's tough, and we're faced with these choices all the time as chicken keepers, especially since we have limited resources as far as like even having veterinary care. A lot of stuff we have to figure out on our own. And luckily, there's a great chicken keeping community. It does have its issues at times where people are just like fighting and getting ridiculous about stuff. But for the most part, people really try to help each other. So that's what we're dealing with here. And I will just keep you guys updated. It's tough because I made a video about how one of my chickens was trying to hatch out some of Philippe's eggs. And so I had to like go under the chicken house to try and get her out of there and get the eggs. And I like taped all of it or recorded all of it, and it was really funny. But now that Philippe is sick, I don't want to be like talking about how he's the spawn of Satan. But he is. Okay, I am just going to go through and see what's going on in the chat here. So just Okay, I see 13 Moons is helping out some people. Obviously, Oscar, one of my hens is wheezy and has been laying down a lot. Oh, that's not a good sign. I would say veterinary care is really the best route to go if you can, because there's any number of issues it could be with that kind of symptom. And but that sounds like a respiratory thing. Of course, I'm not a vet, so I cannot diagnose. um so take everything I say with my little disclaimer rolling. I am not a vet, and I'm not a homeopath, all that good stuff. You might want to check out my video. It's called Chickens Sneezing. Here's what to do. And that will give you just some really simple things to do when you find that you have respiratory issues going on in your flock. It's not a diagnosis. It's not a cure for anything, but it may help you. And definitely while you're on the road to doing some research or perhaps getting some veterinary care, it will help you with the first steps that you can take to support your chicken and your flock when you have respiratory stuff going on. So check that out, and I hope that that clears up. Lydia Fink says, I've got 25 chicks who are turning 4 weeks old this week. Congratulations. They're little velociraptors right now, little teenagers. Selena says that it sounds like Philippe needs some Valium. He's not the only one. Okay, so I'm just going to ask. Chloe Smith has a question here in the chat, and I'm just going to answer her really quickly. If you would like to submit a question for the next Bawk Talk Live, the best way to do that is to go to my website, welcome-to-chickenlandia.com, go to the contact section, and then you're going to find a little drop-down menu, and it'll say, ask a chicken question. You can go there and ask your question. I try to answer the questions that come up in the live chat, but sometimes I can't do it because, as I always say, this is a one-woman show on this end. I've got my wonderful moderators that help out, but I don't have anybody that's like putting questions in front of me. So sometimes I will miss them. So the best way to get your question answered is to submit it through my website. That being said, Chloe Smith has a question here. I have 2 hybrid hens, 1 cross bantam. I'd love to get 2 frizzle Pekin chickens. So a Pekin is like a Cochin over in the UK. But I heard they're on the low on the pecking order and can get bullied. So would it be best to leave it? It really depends on the individual chicken where they're going to be on the pecking order. In the pecking order, there's sometimes when you might have generally, there are some breeds where you could say that more often than not, they are lower on the pecking order. But it really depends on the individual chicken. So I will tell you that I have Cochins, and I know that they're different. It's a different line and than what you have in the UK. But I had one that she was basically a bully. She was a frizzle Cochin, and she like ruled the coop for a while. And then she got really old and she turned into like this sweet grandma chicken. But for the majority of her life, she was not putting up with anything, and she was certainly not low on the pecking order. So what I would do is go for it. That's what I would do. Now that is what I would do. You got to do your research and make sure that you're making the best choice for your flock. If you check out my video that is about integrating chickens, and I can't even remember the name right now, I'm going to put the link in the description and in the podcast notes. And I'll also do that with the chickens sneezing video. Then you can just integrate them very slowly, and usually it works out just fine. And I've integrated like tiny bantams, and I've got big chickens. That being said, it always depends on the personality of your flock. So there are some flocks that they just will not accept new chickens. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. So always have a plan, in case you need to go a different direction with it. Oh, pekin. Pekin. I'm pronouncing it wrong. Sorry about that. I'm trying to court the UK crowd. I'm not gonna do it if I'm mispronouncing their favorite chicken's name. Homesteading the hard way, thank you so much for being here. They said most vets around here won't treat chickens, and that's true. That a lot of vets will not treat chickens, but sometimes if you can find a vet that will treat exotic birds, they might be willing to consult you on a chicken. Swampy Acres Homestead, thank you for being here. And so, Meadowview Little Chicken Farm says, I just got chickens. Yay! Congratulations for you. You are on a wonderful adventure and your life is going to change. I just love it. So I forgot to say what we were going to talk about at the beginning. So today we've got a few different topics. The number one topic that we are going to talk about is chickens in the city, urban chicken keeping. I have a video that I put out a while ago, like several months ago, about keeping chickens in the city. And right now, that video is getting a lot of traction because there's many, many people that really want to know if they can have chickens in the city right now for obvious reasons. So we're going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about some predator proofing stuff. And then I'm going to talk about something that I hear about a lot, and a lot of chicken keepers will contact me and they really don't, they just want to know that they're doing enough. And so we're going to talk about that too. But I'm going to get right into the first question that I received via my website, welcome to chickenlandia.com. There's a contact section. You press it. You do the little scroll down menu. It says ask a chicken question. That is how you can make sure that your question gets answered, as long as it's on topic, because I may get some weird questions. So that's how you can submit a question for my next Bawk Talk Live. But this one is from Ramona, and she asks, is there anything special I should know about raising chickens in the city? I love this question. For those of you that don't know, I am basically in the city. I'm technically in the county because I'm in the county. I'm technically in the county. I'm physically in the county, but I'm literally like maybe like a block or two outside the city limits, and I live in a subdivision. So this area that I live in was actually supposed to have an HOA, but it never developed because for whatever reason, just the way it went down. We moved here right when the stock market crashed. I believe it was 2006. And so, the neighborhood it was a new neighborhood, and all of a sudden nobody was buying houses. So the HOA didn't develop, thank goodness, because I have chickens, I have roosters. My neighbors are absolute saints. And then I heard yesterday there's another rooster that lives up the street. So I was like, oh, that's so cute. And I think it's a little guy, because you can hear him. He's like, or he's a baby. He might be a baby rooster, which is adorable. So I feel like I basically, have an urban chicken keeping thing going on here. I have a small space that a relatively small space where I keep my chickens. And so I love to help people get set up in smaller spaces. And there are a few things that I want you to think about if you are considering getting chickens and you live in the city. Uh, the number one thing that you need to think about is what the laws are where you live. So even if you live in a city where you're allowed to have chickens, it may be that you're only allowed to have a certain number of chickens. It also may be that you can have hens, but you can't have roosters. And there may be laws regarding how close your coop can be to your neighbors, um, and how you can keep them housed. Also, uh, you could live in a place where you can have chickens, but if you live in a neighborhood that has an HOA, that HOA may have laws that say you cannot have chickens. So it's super important for you to know that before you jump into it. I know it's awful when somebody can't have chickens, but I would suggest to you, if you can't do it, you probably shouldn't. Like, if you're not supposed to, you probably shouldn't because, sometimes it can be pretty heartbreaking for people when they kinda jump into it and they fall in love with their chickens, and then all of a sudden they have to give them away. So, that is something very important to keep in mind. Our Serenity Homesteads, thank you so much for being here. Um The other thing that I want you to think about is how much space you have and how many chickens you can have, according to how much space you have. Now, I do have a video that I put out just a few weeks ago called How Much Space Do Chickens Need? And I'm going to leave that in the link in the description and in the podcast notes so you can find that there. And I usually what people find is that unless they're on a really super small lot, they can pull it off. And like I said, always know what the laws are first. But I think that, we have this vision that, well, if I'm going to keep chickens, then they really should be on pasture and they should be free ranging. But I will tell you, my chickens are not on pasture and they're not free ranging. And I think they're pretty happy chickens. And when I think about where most chickens live the entirety of their life, um, I think that it's good. The more people that will keep chickens on their lots, even if the chickens are in a smaller space, the better. Because, you know, you're not going to be keeping chickens in a space this big. And if you're listening to the podcast, I'm kind of with my hands illustrating the ridiculously small space that factory farm birds live in. It's absolutely just criminal the way that most chickens are raised. So if you look at it with that perspective, then it's kind of like, oh, I do have enough space. So generally, I would say inside the coop, depending on the environment, and the video that I recommended to you goes into more detail, but depending on the environment that you have for them, 2 to 4 square feet per standard size hen inside the coop. And then run space, you're going to want about 10 square feet per standard size hen. And you will be golden, and your chickens will be just fine. And you can do things to keep them entertained. You can hang up a cabbage. You can get them a chicken swing. I don't really know if they like that. Get them a xylophone. They probably won't play it. Um, just, you can put more perches in there for them to play on, and dust baths. And then there's any number of things that you can do. And your chickens are going to be just fine. You really want to pay attention if you're in the city, about or you want to keep in mind that you can end up with a rodent problem if you're not careful, and that can affect not only your home but your neighbor's home. So we don't want that. What I do is I only feed the chickens as much feed as they're going to eat by early afternoon, and then they spend the afternoon clucking and pecking and scratching for bugs. and they do just fine with that. If it's the winter, I'll give them a little snack before they go to bed, but for the most part, they just get what they can eat by early afternoon. And then their food is like put away. And I have a very secure can that I keep their food in that rodents cannot get into. So the your best course of action with rodents is to, if you can think about it in terms of when you're predator proofing, that is great. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a minute. But also, don't give them a reason to come around. If there's grain on the floor, if there's scraps around, they're going to come around. The unfortunate part about that is that there's certain ways where you can raise chickens and they can, that is very sustainable as opposed to giving them chicken feed. There's some people that if they have a little bit more space, they can do more of a permaculture kind of thing where they are feeding the chickens compost and maybe a little bit of grain. And, but when you have more space, you don't have to worry quite as much about how what you are doing could possibly affect your neighbors. And also, the less that you disturb the natural order of things, like the predator population where you live, the less of an issue you will have with rodents, because the predators are there to take care of the rodents. That's what they do. So, but in the city, it's a little bit harder. So that's what I do to make sure that I'm not like getting a whole bunch of rats and having that affect the neighbors. A lot of people feel like if they live in the city, they don't have to worry about predators because, they're in the city. Well, the critters come out at night and sometimes in the day. Raccoons, skunks, certainly rats, even birds of prey. I've had a hawk come a couple of years ago. A hawk came and tried to take my chicken Little Stinker, and Philippe bravely, kept. Actually, I think it was like a year ago. Philippe bravely fought that hawk off, but I mean, it was an ornery little thing. I ran out there with a broom and a dustpan because that's all I had, and I was like, "Get out of here!" My neighbors must have thought I was crazy. And this hawk, he just like sat in the tree and was like, "I'm not going anywhere." It was a young Cooper's hawk, and I had never had a problem here. And I thought, since I'm in a subdivision, there's like dogs around and everything. I'm not going to have to deal with flying predators. Well, once they find out where you are, that's it. That they know where the buffet is. They're going to keep coming back. So at that point, I had to put netting over the chicken yard. And there are times when even raccoons will come during the day. Right now is one of those times. It's early spring. Raccoons or it's not even, is it still early spring? I don't even know. What day is it? Everything's running together. But right now, there are raccoons that have babies and they need to feed their babies, or they're nursing their babies and they're more desperate than normal. So during these times is when they will come out during the day. So it's a battle. I do have 2 videos. They both have very silly intros, but lots of good information. How to predator proof your coop and run. And then there's like a deadliest mistakes, how to predator proof your coop and run. And I also have a video called Keeping Chickens in the City, or Urban Chicken Keeping Chickens in the City. And that talks also about predator proofing. So lots of good tips there. Certainly something that you need to think about. And I'll put those links in the description and in the podcast notes. So before we move on to my next question, I am going to just check out the chat here. I've got a lot of activity going on. Brilliant Creature says, I'm hoping the pecking order will change once I get chicks, because I have a hen named Bear who seems to attack the lowest hen whenever I hold her. Oh, yeah. It's so silly. It is their nature. Now, if there's anybody I missed, just say hello again because I want to know that you're here. The live, the chat goes by pretty fast. If you asked a question and I didn't see it, you can try and ask it again in all caps, and maybe I will see it. Okay. So, Barb asked a question. Barb, I'm not even going to try to say your last name because I'm going to destroy it. We bought a secondhand chicken coop from a lovely family, brought it home, and set it up. How fun. The girls are out there enjoying their new life. My husband started building a run for them. The run is framed out, and we are now deciding on what is best for the walls and the room. I was wondering if you could share what you use for the roof of your coop. Okay, and she says, I know it's not a roof. It looks like some type of netting. So, and then you had mentioned that you're using hardwire cloth. The smaller the gauge, the better. Sometimes it's a little bit more expensive, but the smaller the gauge, then the more critters it will keep out. There are critters that can really get through small spaces. I mean, even like weasels can really get through small spaces. Of course, rats can get through really small spaces that you would be surprised. And then even raccoons will literally reach through chicken wire to grab a chicken piece by piece. It's not good. So the smaller, the smaller the hole, the better. That will be the best thing that you can do. As far as the netting that I'm using, it is very strong netting that I bought on Amazon. It is absolutely horrible to deal with. I had my friend Julie and her wife Chris come and put up this netting for me, and we thought it was going to be this easy thing, and it was just, I mean, they had such a hard time. I felt really bad because it was really difficult to deal with this netting, but it was worth it because it's really, really strong netting. I can't remember off the top of my head the name of the company that makes it, but I bought it off Amazon, and I will put that link in the podcast notes and in the description. And if you're watching this replay and it is Monday night, I give me a little time. It might take me a little time to get all these links on there. But another thing that people do here is we have a marina here. Bellingham is, right off of Puget Sound. So we have this marina, and the fishermen go and they dump their damaged netting. It may just have a few tears in it in this specific spot near where the dumpsters are. And they put it there, they put it beside the dumpsters because they know that people like to come and get that netting because fishing netting is really, really strong netting. So way back when, I had actually gone and got some of this netting, and that's what I used initially over my run, and it worked great. So if you get creative, maybe you're in like a everything free Facebook group or something like that. You can find good netting. There is really, really weak netting, and I just wouldn't recommend that because it really isn't going to do much other than it should keep aerial predators out during the day. But it might not keep stronger critters out, and it just might not last very long. It'll fall down or disintegrate or just the first time it snows, it just falls. So that's something to keep in mind. But, sometimes we have to get creative to make things affordable. So I wanted to talk a minute. Hold on. I'm going to check the chat again really quick. Homesteading the Hard Way says, LOL, my chickens eat the mice. Yeah, they will eat mice. Rats are another story. Sometimes rats can get pretty big. Oh, 13th Moons Homestead is adding the links to these videos that I'm referring to in the chat. Thank you so much for doing that. Faithful Flowers, thank you for being here. New follower just saying hi. After 50 years, decided to have chicks again. Yay! How wonderful. Bought 3 Australorp and ordered 3 Brahmas, which will arrive soon. Totally in love with my girls. That is great. Carmen A asked, this might be a silly question, but how do you know when a chicken is sick? Chickens are almost always moving in some way, even when they're standing still. Somehow they're kind of still moving, and you see them like they're pecking and scratching, moving around. They're very spry. If you see a chicken that is in the corner, droopy wings, not interested in its surroundings, that chicken is very sick. Because chickens will hide their illness very well. They do not want the flock to know that they are a weak member, because at that point the flock could attack that chicken, because the flock really just looks at everything from a flock dynamic viewpoint, like what is best for the flock. If there's a weak link, we need to get rid of that. It's like, you are the weakest link. So, Green Dream Project, thank you for being here. So yeah, it's pretty obvious when you have a sick chicken. Now, it's good to every once in a while just go out and, make sure you're checking out your chickens. You might want to check them for mites occasionally, especially in the fall and springtime, because sometimes once the winter is over, the mites will come out of their little hibernation and, wreak havoc. So, the color of their comb can also be a good indication. If their comb is pale or shrivelly, then they may not be doing well. So it's a good idea to give them a once over occasionally, just to make sure that they're doing well, that they have a good weight. But it's usually pretty easy to tell if they are not feeling well. 13 Moons Homestead asked, will chickens eat baby snakes? They will. So before we go today, I just want to give a shout out to my friend Tony, whose chicken died last night, overnight. And I felt bad because she had sent me a message that was like, hey, my chicken is sick and I'm not sure if I'm doing enough. And really, like, a lot of messages I get, because people know that I'm not a veterinarian, that I can't, say absolutely what you should do in most cases, because there's so many chicken illnesses that take on the same symptom pictures that, first of all, it would be irresponsible of me to try and say, okay, well, it is this, when I'm not a veterinarian, and I could very well be very wrong doing that. So I don't want to do that, and most people understand that. But most of the messages that I get when people have a sick chicken is like, am I doing enough? And I just want to tell all of you out there that yes, you are absolutely doing enough. And certainly my friend Tony, who rescues chickens, and that's a big part of her chicken keeping journey, is helping chickens that otherwise would not even be alive, or would be having a terrible life if it weren't for what they do. So, it's so unfortunate because chickens can't tell us what's wrong. And even vets, I have a chicken vet, and I can't think of one time where I went to a chicken vet and they said, this is exactly what's wrong. Most of the time they were like, well, I think this is what's wrong. Now, if it was like egg bound, then they would be able to tell that pretty quickly. But a lot of times it's just like this guessing game, and they can't tell us what's really going on. So I what I think of, because I have lost a lot of chickens, where I always go is the fact that these are chickens that otherwise, they could be living in factory farms, but they're living here in Chickenlandia and they're greatly loved. And that right there is enough. So, to all of my wonderful chicken friends out there who are wondering if they do enough, yes, you are. And on that note, I want to say that I am so glad that you guys have joined me today. And I'm so pleased about all the people that are listening to the podcast. If you have a chicken question that you want to submit for the next Bawk Talk, please go to my website, welcome to chickenlandia.com. Go to the contact section. There's a little drop down menu. It's going to say ask a chicken question. And just go there and ask your question. Ask away, and I will get it. Right now, I'm not getting that many questions. At some point, it might be that I get so many questions that I have to be pretty selective. But right now, I don't get that many questions. So I'm trying to answer all of them. And I would love to hear from you. Camp Canine Daycare is actually Tony, who I'm talking about right now. And she just said thank you. So you are so welcome. And thank you for taking such good care of your chickens. So thanks, guys, so much. We will see you next time, 2 weeks. Same Chickenlandia time, same Chickenlandia place. Have a great week. Goodbye.